Okay, so let's unpack this. Watching the daily news right now, it honestly feels like staring at a single frame of a movie and just trying to guess the entire plot.
Yeah, you get zero context.
Right. You see a headline about runaway inflation, then maybe another about a looming trade war or, extreme political polarization. And without that broader context, it just looks like random, terrifying chaos.
Which is totally understandable, but it's actually not random at all.
Exactly. So today, we are pulling back the camera to watch the entire 500-year film. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We're drawing on the extensive historical research of billionaire investor Ray Dalio, specifically his major presentation, his book summary for Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, and that incredibly detailed interview he did with Chris Williamson.
Yeah, those sources really lay it all out.
They really do. Our mission today is to basically give you a shortcut through 5 centuries of global history. We want to help you understand exactly why today's economy and political climate feel so unstable, and most importantly, how you can actually navigate it.
It's wild because it fundamentally changes your perspective when you pull back that far. Like, the daily panic just starts to fade.
Because you realize it's happened before.
Exactly. You realize that what you are experiencing is not unprecedented. It's a highly predictable cycle driven by, well, just basic human nature.
Right.
And by understanding the underlying mechanics of how world orders rise and fall, you can transform that panic into preparation. We aren't just going to look at what is happening in the world today, but the foundational cause and effect of why it is happening.
So to understand why the current global system feels like it's fracturing, we first need to look at the blueprint. Like, how does a nation reach the absolute top of the global food chain in the first place?
Right. And Dalio outlines what he calls the big cycle.
The big cycle.
No. Yeah, it's this overarching pattern that typically plays out over, say, 100 to 250 years. You can think of it in terms of seasons.
Like spring, summer, autumn, winter.
Exactly. Where spring is the birth of a new order and summer is the peak of prosperity.
Okay, so how does a country get to that summer peak?
Well, that rise is never accidental. It follows a really distinct chain of cause and effect, driven by 8 specific metrics of power that compound on one another.
8 metrics.
Okay.
Yeah.
A nation doesn't just stumble into global dominance. It begins with the first metric, which is education.
Makes sense.
A society invests heavily in its human capital. They don't just teach technical skills, though. They instill a strong work ethic, a culture of innovation, and importantly, respect for a rules-based system.
Right. And that highly educated populace then naturally drives the second metric, right, which is innovation and technology.
Exactly, because if you have the smartest engineers and scientists,
You invent the best tools.
precisely, and that superior technology makes your goods highly competitive in global markets. That's the third metric, competitiveness.
So your society is simply producing things faster, better, and cheaper than your neighbors.
Yeah, and that massive competitive edge boosts your fourth metric, which is your total economic output, and then your fifth metric, your share of world trade,
Suddenly, your ships and trains are just moving goods to every corner of the globe.
which creates a brand new
You
problem.
have to protect the stuff.
Exactly. You have to protect those highly lucrative trade routes. So the immense wealth generated by that trade is poured into the sixth metric, building a dominant military.
Wow. Okay, so education, tech, competitiveness, output, trade, military.
Right. And once your military secures global trade, rivers of wealth flow back into your country, leading to the seventh metric, the development of a leading financial center.
Oh, like Wall Street.
Yeah, today it's New York. In the 1800s, it was London. In the 1600s, that hub was Amsterdam.
Right. And when a nation becomes the undisputed hub of global trade and finance, it earns the ultimate prize. The 8th and final metric.
Reserve currency status.
Reserve currency status, meaning the rest of the world trusts your money so much that they use it for almost everything.
Exactly. And the Dutch are such a perfect historical precedent for this whole progression.
Oh, yeah. The sources talked about this. In the 1600s, they invested heavily in education and invented a new type of cargo ship called the fluid.
Yeah.
It required a smaller crew but carried way more cargo, so that was their massive technological edge.
And to fund those massive global voyages, they basically invented modern capitalism.
Wait, really? The Dutch invented capitalism.
Pretty much. With the first publicly traded company, the Dutch East India Company. Because they dominated global trade, their currency, the guilder, became the gold standard of its day.
Man. And then the British followed the exact same compounding steps in the 1800s.
They absolutely did. They leveraged their educational and technological edge to spark the Industrial Revolution.
The steam engine.
Right. The steam engine gave them unmatched economic output. The Royal Navy protected their global trade routes. London became the financial capital of the world, and the British pound took over as the global reserve currency.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. It seems like once you have that ultimate cheat code, the reserve currency, you'd never lose it.
You think so?
I mean, you essentially control the global game board. But obviously, the Dutch and the British did lose it, so the math must break down somewhere.
It does.
If getting to the top requires such disciplined, logical steps, why does the empire always fracture? Is it just inevitable laziness, or is something else going on?
What's fascinating here is that the seeds of the decline are actually sown at the absolute peak of that success.
The peak is the problem.
Yeah. When a nation reaches its summer phase, it becomes incredibly wealthy. But as the citizens earn more, their labor becomes far more expensive than the workers in up-and-coming rival nations. So slowly, the empire loses that crucial competitive edge it had in the spring. Meanwhile, those rival nations, they don't have to invent the technology from scratch.
I just copy it.
Exactly. They simply copy the leading empire's innovations.
So you have a situation like British shipbuilders in the 1700s hiring Dutch designers to build better ships, but using much cheaper British labor.
Yeah, exactly. The rival hollows out the empire's economic engine.
Man.
And alongside that economic hollowing out, there is a profound psychological shift. You see a transition from the founders, the tough, disciplined generation that sacrificed to build the wealth, to the inheritors.
The inheritors.
Right. The new generation grows up accustomed to peace, luxury, and just the easy life. Dalio notes that values shift toward decadence. People start working less, they indulge more, and crucially, they assume the prosperity will just automatically continue forever.
It's like the macroeconomic version of that old proverb, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
Where the first generation builds the family business, the second generation enjoys the fruits of it, and the third generation completely squanders it.
Because they never had to learn the grit required to build it in the first place.
Exactly.
That captures the psychological shift perfectly. And because the inheritor generation assumes the good times will never end, they start living far beyond their means.
Right.
They want the lavish domestic lifestyle and the massive global military presence, but they no longer have the unmatched economic output to pay for both. And this pushes the empire into its autumn phase.
The autumn phase.
Yeah, triggering the most dangerous mechanism of all the long-term debt cycle.
Because they hold the reserve currency, they have an artificial safety net. Dalio calls it the exorbitant privilege.
Exorbitant privilege, right.
Like when the whole world uses your currency to trade oil and goods, everyone wants to hold your bonds. So the empire can borrow massive amounts of money at a very low cost to fund their lifestyle.
But the math eventually becomes totally unsustainable. Dalio breaks down the current situation in the United States to illustrate how this debt trap functions.
Okay, let's hear the numbers.
Right now, the U.S. government spends roughly $7 trillion a year, but it only takes in about $5 trillion in tax revenue.
So that leaves an immediate $2 trillion deficit.
Right. But the deficit is only a fraction of the problem.
Wait, a fraction?
A very small fraction. You have to add roughly $1 trillion just to pay the interest on the debt they already owe.
Good grief.
On top of that, there is about $9 trillion in old debt that is maturing, meaning it either has to be paid off or rolled over into new debt.
Okay, wait, let me do the math.
Go for it.
So when you add the $2 trillion spending deficit, the $1 trillion in interest, and the $9 trillion in expiring debt the U.S. government has to find buyers for $12 trillion in debt in a single year.
Yes, $12 trillion. And international buyers, like China or Japan, are holding less of it and becoming increasingly wary of buying more.
But wait, if a regular corporation needs to roll over massive debt and the buyers suddenly dry up, that company goes bankrupt.
Exactly.
But a government holds the printing press. So when they can't find real buyers for that $12 trillion, they don't put up a closed sign. The central bank just steps in and artificially creates new money to buy the government's debt, right?
That is the historical escape hatch. They monetize the debt. The central bank creates credit out of thin air to keep the government functioning.
Wow.
We saw this in 1933 during the Great Depression when FDR took the U.S. off the gold standard domestically so the government could print more paper money.
Right, and didn't Nixon do the same thing?
He did.
Yeah.
On a global scale, on August 15th, 1971, President Nixon officially severed the dollar's link to gold internationally. Money transitioned from being a hard asset that constrained government spending to pure fiat,
Fiat money.
right? A paper credit backed by absolutely nothing but the government's promise.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, it sounds exactly like a family paying off multiple maxed out credit cards by opening a brand new credit card just to pay the minimums. But eventually, the bank stops increasing the limit.
That's a great analogy. Dalio uses a very visceral medical analogy for this. He says debt service payments act like plaque in the arteries of an economy.
Plaque in the arteries.
Yeah. As more and more of the nation's income is diverted strictly to servicing old debt, it physically squeezes out the government's ability to spend on productive things.
Infrastructure decays, education funding drops.
Innovation stalls.
Yeah.
Exactly. The central bank is trapped into printing money just to keep the system alive.
But if you just print trillions of dollars, you dilute the value of the money that's already circulating. Prices for everyday goods shoot up, and religions almost never keep pace with that kind of rapid inflation.
No, they don't.
So the working class, who rely on a biweekly paycheck, gets absolutely crushed, while the people holding hard assets like stocks, real estate, or businesses see their net worth artificially explode. That sounds like a recipe for a massive social explosion.
It is. The financial plaque leads directly to domestic social sickness.
Yeah.
As the currency is devalued, you see the emergence of massive wealth and values gaps.
Right.
The contrast can become staggering. Dalio lives in Connecticut and uses a devastating example right in his own backyard.
Oh, the Greenwich example?
Yes. He points to Greenwich, which is an enclave of extreme wealth, booming with tech unicorns and massive hedge fund capital. But just 15 minutes up the road is Bridgeport.
15 minutes.
Yeah. And there you have a situation where roughly 22% of high school students are either dropping out or chronically failing.
Ah.
They're living in neighborhoods plagued by poverty, while the state simultaneously spends $700 million a year on incarcerations.
You literally have two entirely different realities existing 15 minutes apart. And when that inequality hits a boiling point, citizens realize the system is fundamentally broken. History shows us this breeds extreme populism on both sides of the political spectrum, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
On the left, you get movements demanding a forced, radical redistribution of wealth. On the right, you get movements fiercely defending that wealth and demanding strict law and order. And, we want to be incredibly clear to you listening right now, we are not endorsing a political side here. We are simply reporting the mechanics of the historical cycle as laid out in the research.
Right. The cycle itself is totally apolitical. What history shows is that in this late autumn phase, the middle ground completely erodes. Citizens abandon the concept of compromise because they feel their actual survival is at stake.
So they look for a savior.
Exactly. They look for strong men, populist leaders who promise to fight for their specific faction and win at all costs, bringing order to the chaos. Politics stops being a negotiation and becomes a zero-sum game where one side can only win if the other side loses.
But what about technology? We have the most advanced tech in human history right now. We're sitting on the precipice of the AI revolution. Doesn't something like artificial intelligence bridge this productivity gap and create enough new wealth to fix the divide? Or does it just pour gasoline on the fire?
It acts as a massive accelerant. The sources reference a Microsoft white paper on AI disruption, and it reveals a crucial shift. Historically, mechanization displaced blue-collar labor.
Like factory workers or lumberjacks.
Exactly. But AI targets cognitive labor. The jobs most immediately displaced are middle management, legal analysts, and administrative roles.
Wow.
So while AI will offer massive productivity gains for the corporations that own it, it will hollow out the white-collar middle class.
That's terrifying.
If that transition isn't managed with incredible foresight, it will rapidly widen the gap between the asset owners and the displaced workers, further inflaming the internal tension.
So you have an empire that is financially over-leveraged, struggling with inflation, and tearing itself apart politically. Historically, that level of internal bleeding is exactly when rising external rivals decide to make a move. The sharks smell blood in the water.
Which brings us to winter. The domestic crisis becomes a global crisis. Historians call this the Thucydides trap.
The Thucydides trap.
Yeah, named after the ancient Greek historian who chronicled the inevitable war when a rising Athens challenged the established power of Sparta.
Right.
In the past 500 years, when a rapidly rising power challenges a stagnant ruling power, it almost always ends in a conflict to determine whose rules will govern the next era. Today, we see the mechanics of this trap playing out between the United States as the established power and China as the rapidly rising rival.
And the sources map out 5 types of non-shooting wars that occur during this transition. Let's actually look at how these work mechanically. For instance, a capital war isn't just about out-earning the rival. It's about weaponizing the global financial system. Because the U.S. controls the reserve currency, they can literally lock a rival nation or its oligarchs out of the international banking system.
Paralyzing their ability to buy oil or sell goods.
Right. And the rival responds by trying to build an entirely alternative banking system and bypass the dollar using their own currency.
The exact same dynamic applies to the technology war. It is a battle to secure the foundational tools of the next century.
Like AI and microchips.
Exactly. Restricting the rival's access to advanced microchips or dominating the rollout of 5G infrastructure, ensuring the opposing nation remains technologically subservient.
And beyond capital and tech wars, you have trade wars, where nations slap tariffs on imports to choke the rival's domestic industries.
Yep.
You have geopolitical maneuvering, which is the chess match of building military alliances and vying for influence over strategic locations like Taiwan or the South China Sea. And finally, cyber warfare, which operates constantly in the shadows, hacking infrastructure, stealing intellectual property, and spreading disinformation to further polarize the rival's population.
And this multi-front rivalry is vastly complicated by their opposing systems of governance.
How so?
Well, the U.S. operates a polarized democracy. Its historical strength is that it's self-correcting. It relies on elections, free markets, and a free press to surface the best ideas.
But in its late-stage cycle,
Its weakness is severe gridlock and internal division. China, conversely, is an authoritarian state. Its strength is the ability to execute massive, multi-decade plans decisively, directing capital wherever the state demands without getting bogged down in partisan fights.
what's the catch?
Its critical weakness is the lack of a feedback loop. If the centralized leadership makes a catastrophic mistake, there is no public safety valve like a democratic election to course correct.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. The world is vastly more interconnected today than it was during the rise of the British or the Dutch. A single stuck cargo ship in the Suez Canal wrecks global supply chains for months. Doesn't the guarantee of mutual economic destruction, not to mention the existence of nuclear weapons, make the old rules of empire wars completely obsolete?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, nuclear deterrence absolutely changes the math of a kinetic shooting war.
Right, nobody wants the world to end.
Leaders recognize that a nuclear exchange is apocalyptic, so direct battlefield confrontation is heavily avoided. However, the tests of power do not go away.
They just shift.
Exactly. If these rival nations cannot shoot bullets at each other, they simply ruthlessly escalate the other 5 forms of conflict. They will push the trade, tech, capital, geopolitical, and cyber wars to the absolute breaking point to establish dominance. The transition of global power will happen. The only question is the mechanism used to enforce it.
Which is incredibly sobering. We have traced the 500-year blueprint here. The springtime rise of education and innovation, the summer peak of prosperity, the autumn plaque of the debt cycle, the resulting internal fractures, and the winter showdowns for global dominance.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And since you and I and the listener cannot single-handedly stop a macroeconomic cycle of this magnitude, our focus has to shift. How do you protect yourself? When the macro environment turns chaotic, what is the personal playbook for navigating the winter?
Dalio is emphatic about this. While you cannot control the shifting world order, you have immense control over your personal exposure to it.
Okay, where do we start?
The very first step is embracing reality. Do not act like the inheritor generation, blindly assuming the summer prosperity will last forever. You have to study history so you are mentally prepared when the system resets.
Practically speaking, the sources emphasize aggressive diversification.
Yes, absolutely.
If central banks are structurally trapped into printing money to service a $12 trillion debt load, the purchasing power of paper money will just continue to drop. You need to hold different asset classes.
Right. That means allocating a portion of your portfolio to hard assets. Things like real estate, gold, or commodities, which historically hold their physical value when fiat currency is devalued.
You also need to prepare for tail risks.
Tail risks, yeah. These are highly unlikely but massively disruptive events. In a highly volatile winter phase, supply chains freeze and political shocks happen. Preparing for tail risks means ensuring your household has a deep buffer, whether that is physical supplies, a robust emergency fund, or multiple streams of income.
So you must focus on long-term fundamentals and essentially tune out the daily noise of the news cycle.
Precisely.
So essentially, you're saying, I need to run my own life and my household exactly like a nation in its spring phase. I need to keep my personal debt extremely low, produce more value than I consume, and invest heavily in my own education.
That is the exact blueprint. I love that analogy. Resilience isn't just a financial concept. You have to build immense personal resilience. You need to constantly upgrade your skills to remain adaptable, especially as cognitive disruptions like AI threaten white-collar industries.
Right.
You have to nurture strong alliances with your family and your local community. And crucially, you have to maintain your physical health. Because during these massive historical transitions, incredible opportunities always arise.
Like new technologies are born, entirely new industries are created.
Yes, but you can only capitalize on those opportunities if your personal foundation is rock solid. In the big cycle, winter is harsh, and it clears away the rot of the old, over-leveraged system. But winter is always followed by spring, bringing a period of massive renewal, rebuilding, and progress.
That is the perfect way to frame it. By understanding the 8 compounding metrics of a rising empire, the treacherous creeping plaque of the long-term debt cycle, the inevitable internal divides, and the external clashes for dominance, you now possess historical X-ray vision.
It really is X-ray vision.
The chaotic, terrifying headlines on the evening news are no longer random noise. They are highly predictable data points in a 500-year cycle, a cycle that you can navigate with preparation and calm.
The patterns have always been there. It simply requires the willingness to pull back the camera and study the full picture.
We learned today that the lifespan of a dominant global reserve currency is typically around 100 years. The British pound's reign ended when World War II bankrupted the empire, leading directly to the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944.
Right.
And that is where the US dollar officially took the undisputed crown. If history's clock is ticking right on schedule, we are living in the exact decade where that 100-year timer runs out.
It's quite a thought.
So as you go about your week, ask yourself if the era of paper fiat money is reaching its historical expiration date, what truly replaces it in our modern digital world? Because the movie is still rolling, and we are about to see the next frame.